Welcome to Nineworks TV. It's new 911 day. We have got loads of information on the 992.2. It's the facelift version of the 8th generation 911. So many changes coming up, far more than we were expecting. This new 911 generation is clearly the most innovative yet, but it also erodes some key facets of the traditional 911's DNA. Let's dive into all the stats as we look at 7 new 911 models. Right then, all is changing today. We've got 7 new models and so much to get through. Normally when Porsche announces a new 911 generation, it happens around September, October, autumn time, the start of the new model year. That really should have happened in September, just gone, September 23, but I can only assume there are issues with production and finishing up the 992.1 generation as to why this has been delayed for the 992.2 to May 2024. But nevertheless, the car and the new generation is launching handsomely with those 7 models. So I think that's kind of Porsche's own admission that it's got some catching up to do. The 7 models that we're launching involve the Carrera, the entry-level 911, but also the GTS. That model is usually kept a good 18 months to 2 years away from the launch of the 911 Carrera and S. As of today, there's no news on the Carrera S, so whether that's dead or not, no one knows at the moment. But with day dot of the 992.2, we're launching with the Carrera and Carrera Cabriolet, the rear drive GTS Coupe, the rear drive GTS Cab, the all-wheel drive GTS Coupe, the all-wheel drive GTS Cab, and the Targa GTS, which is all-wheel drive. There's your 7 models. Let's dive into big news really, which is the Carrera GTS. That's going to be the popular model. Let's dive into that first and then revisit the Carrera. The big news with the GTS is that, as expected, it's gone hybrid. It's not a plug-in hybrid, however. Instead, Porsche is calling this a performance hybrid with a T-hybrid system, as it features e-power to boost the internal combustion engine, which by the way is now 3.6 litres in capacity. That's up from 3 litres from the 992.1 predecessor. The 992.2 hybrid GTS's arsenal of tech consists an electric motor housed in the 8-speed PDK gearbox, as expected, and an electric turbocharger. On that exhaust gas turbocharger, an integrated electric motor housed between the compressor and the turbine wheel brings the turbo up to speed. What that basically means is the hybrid turbocharger is going to pretty much nullify all sense of the term turbo lag. Now that electric turbo motor on its own produces up to 15 PS, and it also means that the GTS is going to go down to one single turbocharger rather than using the twin turbocharging system that the Carrera and Carrera GTS models have enjoyed since 2017. Meanwhile, the electric motor in what Porsche describes as the new PDK unit, which is still 8-speed, provides up to 40 kilowatt of power or 150 newton meters of torque. Total power for the engine on its own is 485 PS with maximum torque at 570 newton meters. However, combining the hybrid and combustion engine power together brings a total of 541 PS and 610 newton meters of torque. Now, for context, that's a 61 horsepower increase, or PS increase, on the 992.1 GTS. This means that elsewhere, for example, the aircon has gone fully electric, removing the belt, making the engine much more compact in the back of the 911. Other stats to be aware of, it's the same top speed in the GTS 992.2 as the 992.1, that's 193 mile an hour. The 0-60 sprint though is reduced by 1/10 of a second. In the real world, this doesn't look like a lot, does it? But Porsche has promised us hugely dynamic driving characteristics. However, there is a weight penalty to this hybrid technology. The 992.2 Carrera GTS now weighs in at 1,595 kilos with PDK. That's 50 kilos heavier than its 992.1 predecessor. Elsewhere with the GTS, rear axle steering is now standard, as is Porsche Dynamic Chassis Control, which is basically electro-hydraulically operated active anti-roll bars. That's been integrated into the electric hybrid system. The GTS also gets sports PASM suspension with a 10mm lowered ride height as standard spec, along with Porsche Sports exhaust. There are 20 and 21 inch wheels on the 992.2 GTS, like its predecessor. However, you've an extra ½ inch width at the rear to obviously help put that extra power down on the floor. It's time to talk design then, because there are some subtle and not so subtle changes to the 992.2. Big news really is, first off the bat, we've got model specific bumpers for the first time. As you can see on this 992.2, the slats, instead of being horizontal, are now vertical. It's all part of a comprehensive new active aerodynamic package, which is standard on these GTS models. And what these flaps do along here that you can see, along as two hidden ones at either side of the bumper, as well as rear diffusers under the front of the car, they open and close to best optimize aerodynamics and cooling. Okay, when they're closed, it's the most aerodynamically efficient setup. They then open fully to channel a load of air into the front radiators of the GTS to aid with the car's cooling. At the rear, obviously, there are subtle design tweaks, most pleasingly of which is the fact that this rear license plate has moved up, filling what I always thought was that horrible void between the license plate and the Porsche lettering on the 992.1. This is a great success. Let's move inside the 992.2, where unfortunately there are two key losses of 911 DNA. We'll start with the most obvious, and that is the fact that the instrument cluster is now fully digital. You may remember with the 992.1 predecessor, there was an analog tachometer still in the middle, either side of digital clocks. That was the last bastion of the iconic 5-dial setup that has been in place on the 911 since its inception in 1963. Unfortunately for the 992.2, it's gone, and we've now just got this wraparound, fully digital screen, a bit like the Taycan really. That's extremely sad, by the way. Also gone, and this definitely is a head scratcher, is the 2+2 layout of the 911. It's always been a 2+2 sports car since 1963, but now for coupes only, Porsche is offering the car as standard as just a two-seater. I've absolutely no idea why. The good news is, and I suspect many people will do this, is you can option the rear seats back in at no charge. We all know nobody sits in those rear seats, but they are nevertheless handy and practical. And the weight penalty is negligible, far less than the 50 kilos of the hybrid system, for example. And I know most of you are going to pop those rear seats back in, but as it stands, the 911 Coupe is now a two-seater sports car. Elsewhere in the interior, Porsche says there's a better integration of instruments around the steering wheel as part of the Porsche driver experience. Mode wheel, for example, hanging off the steering wheel, that stays. There's now a start button to start the engine rather than like the rotary dial that the 992.1 had to bring the flat six and hybrid system to life. And that really signals the introduction to the GTS. It's 132 grand in the UK. That's 10k more than the outgoing 992.1, okay? First deliveries of the GTS are going to be with us at the end of 2024. Before that though, we're going to welcome the Carrera, the entry-level 911 to the 992 generation. That's going to be here before the end of summer, okay? There are changes to that car, not anything like the GTS. And here's the first look at it. Now, interestingly, the Carrera doesn't get hybrid technology. Instead, Porsche says it's going to maintain the 3-litre twin turbocharged flat six of its predecessor, albeit it's lightly modified. What does that mean? Well, the detail essentially is it's getting the intercooler from the previous generation 911 Turbo. They're now going to sit on top of the flat six like the turbocharged car rather than at the side. And it adopts the turbochargers from the previous generation GTS. And in the 992.1, those turbochargers were unique to that car. They're now being brought into the Carrera. The result of that, crucially, Porsche is keen to point out, is a reduction in emissions, but a power boost of around 10 PS over the 992.1. That means that the entry-level 911 is just shy of 400 PS these days. Crazy figures. Maximum torque is up to 450 Newton meters. Top speed is the same as previously, but again, the 992.2 shaves a tenth of a second off the 0-62 dash. That's top level. There's a lot to digest there. There are some questions that remain unanswered. Number one question is, what is happening to the 911 Carrera S? Now, as we know in recent years, with the popularity of the GTS and the robustness of the entry-level Carrera, it's kind of squeezed the I don't know, market gap really of the Carrera S. That's why Porsche traditionally has always allowed 18 months to 2 years of 911 and 911 Carrera and Carrera S sales before the GTS arrives to protect that. With the GTS launching straight away, it remains to be seen if the 992 S and 4S will see the light of day. I'm also trying to ascertain if the 3.6 litre capacity flat six combustion engine in the 992.2 is the same block as the 3 litre twin turbocharged car in the 992.1. You may also be aware that that same engine is responsible for the 4 litre naturally aspirated setup in the 718 Cayman and Boxster series. It does have that dexterity. Whether it's the same engine or not, I'm afraid at this early stage, I just don't know. I'm trying to find out. The last thing, and perhaps biggest really for us enthusiasts, is where's the stick shift? When the 992.1 generation was launched, we had to wait over a year for the manual gearbox to appear as PDK only to begin with. That seems to be the case so far. Again, that's just as far as I understand. We're a couple of hours away from the embargo lifting, and again, I only received this information around an hour ago myself. So if there are any immediate updates on that, I'll pop the answers in the comments below. But as it stands, all of these 7 models across the 992.2 generation that are launched today all come with PDK, 8-speed PDK as standard. That's about it. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for bearing in mind with my sniffles. I've got some serious man flu going on. I want to say thanks to Porsche GB for passing the information for this over ahead of embargo. Again, I only received information around 4 hours before embargo lifted. I'm told there were delays with colleagues in Germany for getting the assets out to the media. That's about it. I'm going back to bed. Thanks for watching IMAX TV, and we'll see you again soon.